So, guys, after law of demand and its assumptions, the next thing that we need to understand is demand, quantity demanded, demand schedule, and demand curve. Though we have already discussed about demand once when we started with this chapter, but here we will see demand in different way. So I'm starting with demand first. Now listen to me carefully, guys. Suppose my friend has recently come to Indore from Mumbai, and here in Indore he wants to start an ice cream factory. And initially he just wants to start with only one flavor, that is vanilla, and one variant of it, that is cup of 250 grams. Now he asked me what would be the demand of his ice cream so that he could plan his production. And I gave him answer like this. I told him this is price per cup of ice cream and this is quantity demanded per cup of ice cream. So I told him that in case you sell each cup for rupees 10, there would be demand of around 180 cups in a day. If you keep the price rupees 15 per cup, the demand per day, that is the quantity demanded per day, would be 130. If the price is 20, it would be 100. If the price is 25, it would be 70. He asked me demand, and this is how I told him demand. It means, guys, demand is always presented in form of a schedule of price, different prices, corresponding and the corresponding quantity demanded, right? So this is how demand is presented. So demand is units, that is quantity of a commodity, which consumers of a market are expected to buy in a particular period at different prices. Demand is presented in form of a schedule comprising of different prices and quantities or different quantities corresponding to each of these prices. So this is how, guys, demand is defined or explained. So the one that I have made here is to present demand, and this is called demand schedule. So what is demand schedule? It is a set of quantities of a particular commodity, set of different commodities, different quantities of a particular commodity at different prices which consumers are which is made to present demand of a commodity in a particular market during a particular period of time. So this is how we can explain or define demand schedule. I hope you have understood this. So demand is never expressed just with one single quantity. It is expressed with different quantities, means it is expressed with a set of different quantities corresponding to different prices. That is, demand is always expressed or presented in form of a demand schedule. I hope you have understood this. Now next is quantity demanded. Now suppose my friend, instead of asking me demand, he asked me another question. He asked me how many cups he would be able to sell in case he keeps the price of each cup rupees 20. I repeat, he asked me how many cups he would be able to sell if he keeps price per cup rupees 20. This time he is not asking demand, but he's asking quantity demanded. That is, quantity demanded is always at a particular price. When he asked me demand, he did not tell me about price. He simply asked me what would be the demand of his ice cream cups. And I told him demand in form of this schedule, right? So it is quantity of a commodity which consumers of a market are expected to buy at a particular price at a particular point of time. So I think now you have understood demand and quantity demanded. In quantity demanded, we have a particular price. In case of demand, here we have different prices. There is the first difference between demand and quantity demanded. The second difference is demand is always presented for a particular period of time, whereas quantity demanded is always expressed at a particular point of time. Got this? And now demand curve. The curve that we get by plotting data of a demand schedule on a graph by keeping price on y-axis and quantity demanded on x-axis is called demand curve. So when data of a demand schedule are plotted on a graph by keeping price at y-axis and quantity demanded at x-axis, a curve is obtained known as demand curve, right? So when I plot this data on a graph where I keep prices on y-axis and quantity demanded on x-axis, the curve that I get is a demand curve. Now you can see here one thing you would have noticed this, that here also we are following the law of demand. That is, with increase in prices, quantity demanded are decreasing. Right? I hope you have understood. So now with this data, I am making a demand curve. Here I am making the demand curve. This is origin. Here we will keep price of ice cream. And here we will keep on x-axis quantity demanded of ice cream. Here I am making a scale of 5. So this is how I have made a scale of 5. That is 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 for prices of ice cream. And here I am making scale for quantity demanded. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180. So here I have made a scale of 20. Now I will plot the data. So I'm making the schedule here as well. Price and quantity demanded. 10, 15, 20, 25. Here 180, 130. 170. So at price 10 and quantity demanded 180, we will have a point somewhere here. At price 15 and quantity demanded 130, point will be somewhere here. At price 20 and quantity demanded 100, the point would be somewhere here. and at price 25, quantity demand at 70, the point would be somewhere here. By joining these points with freehand, the curve that I get is demand curve. It means demand curve is downward sloping from left to right. You can see that this curve is moving downward from left to right, right? So our demand curves are always like this. We can also make a demand curve in form of a straight line like this. This is also downward sloping demand curve. So this is called downward sloping demand, downward sloping or negatively sloped demand curve. Why do we call it negatively sloped? Because there is negative or inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, and this happens with all the normal goods. It means for all the goods which are not exceptions to the law of demand, the demand curve would be downward sloping. I hope you have understood this. So after understanding demand curve, now the next thing that we have is rationale of the law of demand. That is why demand curve is so, or why the law of demand is so. Means why there is negative relationship between price and quantity demanded, because we know that law of demand says this only, that price of a commodity and its quantity demanded are inversely related. That is, with rise in price, quantity demanded falls, and with fall in price, quantity demanded rises. And this is what is law of demand. So why it is so? Let's understand that. This can be asked in exam like, why the law of demand is so, or why is demand curve for all normal goods downward sloping or negatively sloped, or why are price of a commodity and its quantity demanded are inversely or negatively related, or why demand of a commodity falls when its price rises, or vice versa. So this rationale of law of demand can be asked in any way. So let's understand that there are some reasons because of which the law of demand is so, that is, demand of a commodity falls when its price rises and vice versa. Let's understand those points. The first one is availability of substitutes. So a commodity for which substitutes are available, their demand will fall when price of the commodity rises, because with rise in price now consumers have chance to move to shift to its substitute, and when they shift to substitute, demand of the main commodity falls. Now, had there not been substitute, consumers would not have any choice and they would not have shifted from the commodity whose price rises. I hope you have got this. So when price of Pepsi rises, its demand falls because some of the consumers of Pepsi shifts towards Coke or Thumbs Up. Correct? Similarly, when price of a commodity falls, its demand rises. Why this happens? Again, because of availability of substitutes. Because when price falls, the consumers who were using substitutes, now they shift towards the main commodity. So when price of Pepsi falls, those who were consuming Coke and Thumbs Up earlier, some of them now shift towards Pepsi. Why? Because price of Pepsi has fallen. And this is how demand of Pepsi rises. Right? I hope you have understood this. So demand of a commodity falls when its price rises because some of the consumers of the commodity shift towards its substitutes. So when price of Pepsi rises, its demand falls as some of the consumers of Pepsi shift towards Coke and Thumbs Up. Similarly, demand of a commodity rises when its price falls because that time some consumers of substitutes of the commodity shifts towards the commodity. So when price of Pepsi falls, some consumers of Coke and Thumbs Up shift towards Pepsi. I hope you have understood this, right? So this is price of Pepsi. This is quantity demanded of Pepsi. This is price of Coke, and this is quantity demanded of Coke. So let's say price of Pepsi is 20 and at price 20 its quantity demanded is 100 in a day in a very small town. Price of Coke is also 20 and its demand is, let's say, 80. That is 80 bottles a day. Now, price of Pepsi, if rises to 25, demand of Pepsi will decrease and let's say become 70. Why? Because some of the consumers of Pepsi now have shifted towards Coke. So this is how demand of Pepsi has fallen from 100 to 70 and Coke, demand of Coke has risen from 80 to 110. Why? Because some of the consumers of Pepsi have shifted towards Coke because price of Coke has not changed. I hope you have got this. Now, in case price of Coke rises, its demand will fall. Why? Because some of the consumers of Coke now will shift towards Pepsi. So here, fall in demand of Coke is 50 bottles, and with 50 bottles, demand of Pepsi has risen because there is no change in its price. And this is what is because of availability of substitutes. I hope you have understood this. The second point here is change in consumers' real income. Real income is the one which can buy you goods. So, real income basically is the purchasing power. It is not the actual income, but it is real income in terms of your purchasing power, right? Real income means purchasing power of a consumer. Purchasing power gets affected due to change in prices of commodities. So when price of let's say apples rises from 100 to rupees 120 per kg, its demand falls. Why? Because some consumers now will not purchase as much of apples as they were purchasing earlier because now they cannot purchase that much of apples because of rise in its price. And this is what is change in their real income, that is purchasing power. So let's understand this with this example. This is price of apples and this is quantity demanded of apples again in a small town. Here I am talking about an individual consumer who has fixed monthly budget of rupees 1000 for apples for his family. So when price of apples is rupees 100 per kg, he can purchase 10 kgs and this is how he spends rupees 1000 on apples. However, when price of apples becomes 150, he would be able to purchase only 6 kgs and some grams. Let me calculate that. It is 1000 divided by 150, that is 100 divided by 15, 90, 10, around 6.6 kgs. See, consumers' actual income has not changed. It is just because of change in price of apples that now he can purchase only 6.6 kgs because his budget for apples is fixed. And this is what is actually purchasing power. So with rise in price of apples, purchasing power of this consumer has fallen. So now he can purchase only 6.6 kgs. On the other hand, if price of apples becomes 80 per kg, then he would be able to purchase 12.5 kgs. That is with fall in price from 100 to 180, now he can purchase more apples, right? So this is how when price rises, demand falls. When price falls, demand rises because of change in consumers' real income. I hope you have understood this also. So let me write this here. When price of a commodity rises, consumers at increased price can purchase lesser units of the commodity, and this is fall in their purchasing power, that is fall in their real income. On the other hand, when price of a commodity falls, consumers now can buy more units of the commodity than earlier, and this is how demand of the commodity rises. So I hope you have understood this. Let us understand this with an example of a consumer who has fixed monthly budget of rupees 1000 for apples for his family. And this is the case that when price was rupees 100, he could purchase 10 kgs of apples, but when price became 150 rupees per kg, he now is able to purchase only 6.6 kgs. And when price fell down to 80 per kg, now is able to purchase more in the same budget, right? So we are done with these 2 points of rationale of the law of demand. I hope you have understood these 2 points as why there is inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded of a commodity.